Hi everyone, so today we're taking a look at subject pronouns and what conjugation in French actually is. So let's start with the subject pronouns. In French there are 6 categories of subject pronouns, or 6 groups of subject pronouns. Our first category or first group is je. So this is pronounced je. It's the same thing as I in English. So whenever you want to talk about you, in terms of you doing an action, or I do an action, I do a verb, we use je. Now sometimes you might see it under the form of J with an apostrophe. This is called an apostrophe. And we see this in the case of when there is a verb following it that starts with a vowel. So one of the most common ones that we are going to see is with j'aime. So this means I like or I love. The original 2 words that make up this word is je, which we see over here, and then we have aime, which is to like or to love. Je aime. Notice how when I say this, there is a very weird pause in between the 2 words. Je aime. No matter how fast I say it, it's always going to be there. Je aime. And so, as a result, the French people don't like this pause because they want their language to sound very smooth. And so instead, what they thought was, you know what, we have 2 vowels. We're going to remove one of them, and usually it's the first one. We're going to remove one of them, especially if it's an E. And then we're going to add an apostrophe, and that way we link this together, so it becomes j'aime. See how there is no weird pause anymore? That's what this is. So you might see it under the guise of je, or you might see it as J with an apostrophe. Let's keep going. So our next one is tu, and in English the equivalent is you. Now something to notice here is this you is only talking about one person. Okay? If you're trying to talk to many people using you, then you would not be using tu anymore. Another thing to notice is that when you are using tu, you're talking to one person and you should be pretty close with this person. So this is an informal way of talking to a person. So, for example, the other person is your friend, or maybe a family member that you're close with. Then you would use tu. Moving on, we have il, elle, on. So this group contains 3 different words. They don't mean the same thing. Il is he, so this is for a male person. You're talking about someone else who is a male. Elle is she, so we are talking about a female, feminine. And finally we have on, which in most cases means we. It can also be used as one in the case of an impersonal one. So we can say one can rule the world if they have money, for example. So this one is impersonal. One can do this thing. Not as in like one piece of candy, not the number. Okay, an impersonal designation of someone. And the reason why they're all grouped together is because subject pronouns most of the time are followed by verbs, and verbs need to be conjugated. We'll talk about what that means in just a little bit. But so in terms of the conjugation, the 3 of them, il, elle, on, are all the same conjugation. They're conjugated the exact same way, and that's why they're grouped together into this category. Now the 3 groups that we just saw are what we call singular subject pronouns. What this means is all of these subject pronouns are talking about one singular person, with, of course, the exception of we, but we pretend that it's singular in terms of its conjugation. Next, let's take a look at the other 3 part of the plural group. Let me just erase all of this. Our next one is nous. And this is the official we. So if you're talking about you plus another group of people, or even one other person, you would be using nous. Notice how I did not pronounce the S over here. We do not pronounce a lot of S's at the end of words in French. We'll talk about the rules regarding those later. But for now, just remember, S's at the end of words are not pronounced. Next one is vous. Notice again, the S is not pronounced. This vous is also you, but you'll notice I wrote over here, it's plural. So when you're talking about many people, you're talking to a group of people, 2 or more, you will be using vous. Another use case of vous is when you're talking to one person, but we are trying to be formal. So this is when you do not know the other person very well and you're trying to be respectful to them. So let's say, for example, you are talking to the president, or maybe you're talking to like the principal of a school, for example. You're trying to be respectful, you would use vous instead of tu. Right, so instead of using this one, this is informal, we would use this one instead, which is more formal. And this is also why if you ever go to a French restaurant, a lot of servers would be using vous even though they're talking to one specific person, because they're trying to be respectful. And then we have one last group, right? We said there were 6 different groups. We have il, elle, pluriel, and that's what we call them because, again, we do not pronounce the S at the end of these words. So we call them il, elle, pluriel, pluriel meaning plural, many. So this is they in English. In English, we don't really make the distinction between they, but in French, we group them into 2 separate words. Il is used for a group of boys. So this is masculine, or masculine over here. And elle is feminine, used for a group of girls. So depending on if the group is boys or girls, we would use different words to talk about they. They do this thing. Now you might ask me, well, what happens if the group is mixed? There are some boys and some girls. In this case, as long as the group is mixed, it doesn't matter how many girls or how many boys there are. As long as the group is mixed, we would use il in French. So the only case where we use elle is for if the entire group that we are talking about, they, are all girls or all female. And then we use elle. If this was a bit confusing, maybe with some pictures it might help you. So let's take a look at this. So we have je or J apostrophe, as I mentioned, you're talking about yourself. Tu, we are talking to another person, one other person, and usually this other person is a friend or someone we are close to. Next we have il and elle. Remember, these 2 are conjugated the exact same way, but il is for a male and elle is for a female. We have one last one that is on, used for we, but that one's an impersonal one. If you really wanted to use we can use nous instead. Notice I did not pronounce the S over here. We do not pronounce that. And this is for a group of people, including yourself. Vous is for when you are talking to another group of people, not including yourself, or we are trying to be formal or respectful. Our last category is il pluriel, elle pluriel. Il for talking about a group of people, whether they are all boys or a mixed group. And elle is used for talking about a group of females only, and you're talking to another person about them. And that's it for our subject pronouns. Now let's talk a little bit about conjugation and what that means. So we have 3 different types or groups of verbs in French. We have verbs ending in er. We have groups of verbs ending in ir. And we have verbs ending in re. And these three groups are talking about when the verbs are not conjugated, right? When they are in their original form. The verbs will end in one of these three endings. Later, we'll talk about examples of verbs. So look forward to the next class. But for now, let's talk about conjugation first. So conjugation happens when we have a verb that is an action word, and we are indicating that a subject, so a person or a thing, is doing this verb. And we have to change the verb according to who or what is doing the action. For example, the verb to like. I can say, I like you. Like he or she likes. And notice how we would change the spelling of the verb to match our subject. The exact same thing happens in French. It's just, and the reason why a lot of people think French is harder than English to learn is because in French there's more variation. The conjugations are more diverse. There's more different spellings. So for example, the verb to like in French is the verb aimer. So it would be, again, we're making use of the J apostrophe over here because it starts with a vowel. So it would be j'aime, that we saw earlier. Tu aimes, and then il aime. I write il, but elle and on are the exact same conjugations. Now you might go, well, it doesn't look that different. Okay, well, let's take a look at the plural ones. So I'll write the English one first, and then I'll write the French one. Again, our verb is to like. So our next one is we like, you like, and they like. Notice again, there's not much difference there. But let's take a look at the French one. Again, our verb is aimer. So we start with nous. Nous aimons. Vous aimez. Et il, elle aime. Notice how all three of these are different from our original verb, whereas English, it's pretty much the same. And so here we go. This is subject pronouns, the three different types of verbs, and the very basic explanation of what conjugation is. Hope you enjoyed this, and look forward to the next video where we talk about regular verbs.